Hello, and welcome to The Deep Dive. I'm Grace Woelfel. After Pope Francis's death at the age of 88, 135 cardinals will gather in conclave on May 7th to begin the process of electing a new pope. The end of his 12-year-long papacy on Easter Monday leaves Catholics around the world asking, who will lead the Church? St. Thomas Vice President for Mission, Father Chris Collins, joins us today to discuss the legacy of Pope Francis and what the future of the Church may look like with a new pope. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Pope Francis was known for his progressiveness within the Church, specifically within his advocacy for the poor and marginalized. How would you describe his legacy?
I think that's right on. I mean, especially the focus on migrants and refugees, it was a big thing for him that he really raised a lot of consciousness about that. There are millions of people displaced around the world all the time. So having a great focus on migrants and refugees and all the, any kind of number of people that are put to the margins or don't have a voice, he wanted to be a big advocate for them, and which is part of the life of the Church, you know. So.
Pope Francis's papacy was one of many firsts. He was the first Latin American pope and the first Jesuit pope. As a Jesuit priest, can you describe some of the core values of the religious order and how the late pope lived those out?
Yeah, one of the aspects of the spirituality is to seek God in all things, to find God in all things, in creation, in little human encounters, surprising places especially. You want to have a kind of an attentiveness to find the sacred or the divine in all kinds of different places, not just in church, right? Or not just reading the Bible. We do that too. But we know that God is laboring in all of creation to make himself known to us and his love for us. So that's a big kind of foundational thing within Jesuit spirituality. And I think also the real focus on and this is obvious, but there's a kind of a particularity to it, of the real focus on the person of Jesus and how getting to be friends with him, cultivate a real relationship, let him in on my real life and so on. And so then I also want to act like him and live like him and minister like him too. So it's really focused on, you know, if you want to know how to live the life of the Church, just look at the person of Jesus. And so even Pope Francis is very intimate, personal encounters with all sorts of people. I mean, I think that's also shaped in part by that spirituality of trying to be the presence of Jesus and look for the presence of Jesus in other people too. So,
yeah. Moving into conclave, can you describe the process for electing a new pope?
Yeah, so we're in this in-between time right now after his death, and then the funeral happened, and then there's multiple days of mourning. We're still in that. We're kind of getting near the end of that. But the cardinals from all over the world have been coming to Rome, and I think most of them are probably there by now. And they're having some meetings of some sort leading up to the actual conclave. And a lot of this time is really about them. You know, there's agendas for what they're talking about, but a lot of it is for them to just get to know each other. There's I think it's going to be 133 maybe that are participating and voting. And these are the cardinals that are under 80 years old. So a lot of it is them getting to know each other and just casual conversations and then sharing about what they think is important for the life of the Church in the future. And so this is their biggest job, the cardinals. This is like their only job in a sense, is to choose the next pope. So they've got and that's part of the process, is letting, you know, listen to what other people are saying, what their concerns are on a global perspective, and then do their best to kind of let the Holy Spirit guide the process and the actual voting to choose the best next successor of St. Peter. So.
What are some challenges within the current Church that the new pope will have to address?
Well, there's always, specifically, they have financial problems. There's like pensions that are not funded and so on. So there's a financial element to it that's got to get worked out. That's kind of behind the scenes. There's the ongoing challenge of the clerical sexual abuse crisis that has been with the Church, and especially in other parts of the world. I mean, in the U.S., I think that's been seriously addressed in the last 20 years. But it's how to implement those safeguards and accountability for priests and bishops and so on. That's an ongoing issue that a lot of progress has been made, but it always needs to be better. But then there's also the ongoing, just the global reality of the Church and global conflicts that exist, and the Pope can play a unique kind of behind the scenes diplomatic role, and has tried to do that, like with the war in Ukraine and Russia, for example. He's had a special envoy trying to, you know, be a connector between the parties that are involved in these conflicts, the war in Gaza. You know, so there's always those big diplomatic kind of realities that the Pope can uniquely serve. But then it's also just communicating the faith in a way that people can can understand it. And so there's an evangelizing or a communicating of the gospel on a global, nobody's got a platform like he does to try to communicate the relevance and the meaning of the gospel in every culture and at every point in history too. So there's a lot to do.
As you already touched on, Pope Francis was actively involved in political discourse and international diplomacy. And as the line between politics and religion draws closer, how do you think the church will move forward in these areas?
Well, I think that's always the church always has a responsibility. You know, we have our values, and the dignity of every human person is at the center of Catholic social teaching, and especially the vulnerable. And so the church, that's not just something we talk about internally to the church. I mean, we have an obligation to engage in the public arena on those things and speak up for those who are suffering or marginalized in different ways, the vulnerable in our world. So there's an engagement with politics all the time in the life of the church, but it's about the values and the dignity of the person at the center of it. It's not about picking political sides or candidates. We don't do that. But we do speak up for principles of human dignity and what's good for the common good of society and the world too. So it's important that the church engages on those areas and can speak to the moral dimension of what's required in humanity today. He's got a unique kind of moral voice. Again, he's probably totally unique in the world that has that kind of attentiveness to be a moral voice that speaks for not only the 1.4 billion Catholics, but in some sense on behalf of humanity itself. So, yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Follow along at thecrest.news and follow us on social media at thecrestnews for more stories from your campus community. With Father Chris Collins, I'm Grace Woelfel. We'll see you next time we deep dive.